Observation of a healthy eating lesson. I observed our fourth grade teacher complete a lesson with her students about healthy eating. I looked over the lesson prior to her starting so that I could pay attention to the lesson and not be so focused on reading the lesson itself. It looked as though it was a good lesson that would be interactive for the students and allow them to work with their peers to complete the lesson. The class easily transitioned into the lesson after returning from the classroom from lunch. They sat in their seats and she had no trouble getting their attention, and the lesson started on time almost immediately. She immediately engaged the class by asking students for their definition of healthy eating and also give examples of healthy food choices that they use in their home. The students were quick to raise their hands and offer answers. The class was in control and there was no screaming or yelling of answers. All procedures and expectations for classroom management were followed. She wrote each student's response on a board for reference later on, which I thought was a good visual for the students to remember what had been discussed previously. This part of the lesson was not written in her lesson plan, but I felt it was a good way to introduce the lesson. When we talked afterward, I just mentioned her to include the introduction into her lesson plan the next time so that if another teacher had to teach the lesson, there wouldn't be anything left out. She then pulled out candy bars and apples and asked the student which was a healthier choice for their bodies. All the students chose the apple as the healthier choice. She explained that they would now discuss healthy food choices, the 5 major food groups, and the food pyramid. She listed the 5 food groups on the board and asked students to look them up in their dictionary and take turns defining each one on the board for reference. Again, she gave a visual reference for students to refer back to later in the lesson when they may have forgotten what each food group exactly was. She also asked the students to write the definition in their health notebooks. The students were very interested in the lesson and seemed eager to learn. The teacher spoke with excitement and inflection in her voice to keep the students' attention. She then, along with the class, gave examples of food from each food group and wrote them on the board and in their notebooks. Next, she referred to the food pyramid and asked students if they knew what the food pyramid was and the purpose it served. She allowed students to answer and filled in the blanks where information was missing. Then they played a little game, taking turns naming what food group each food went into. The students stayed calm and in their seats the entire time. There was only a time or two that she had to remind the students to please lower their voices. Everyone participated. There were not any students that seemed disengaged or bored with the lesson. I thought this was great because it's so important that we teach our students about healthy food and healthy lifestyles, healthy choices in their lifestyle. Students were asked to write 2 examples of foods from each group in their notebooks along with the definition of each food group. She then closed the lesson by asking students questions about each food group and about the healthy eating choices. The students got all the answers correct. To finish the lesson, she split them into groups of 2 and gave them a bunch of pictures of food, and they were put to them in the folder labeled for the correct food group. Upon completion, the group shared their folders to make sure that all the foods were in the right group. I found this to be a great lesson, and the teacher herself did a great job executing it. The students were engaged, and when we met afterwards, I told her that she did a great job, and the lesson seemed to flow. The students were engaged. The classroom expectations and procedures were followed. I told her she did a great job keeping them excited, and for the most part, she stayed right with the lesson and didn't deviate from the lesson plans. She spent very little time trying to bring the students back to the lesson because they were too loud or distracted. The students were engaged the entire time, like I had said previously, and I encouraged her to share the lesson with all of her peer teachers.